The biggest secret about intuition is that everybody is intuitive. You are already receiving intuitive messages. You just need to learn how to understand them. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to my channel. Oh my gosh, this is a new location. For those of you who have been here a while, I feel like I haven't sat down and done like a sit down video in so long. It's just been like vlog, one after the other. So this is like my first sit down video in my new home. So curious to see how this background goes, how we're feeling about it. You know, we'll see. But I'm so thankful that you guys are joining me today in this video. We're talking all about intuition and the clear signs that your intuition is trying to reach out to you and get your attention. This is such a fun topic for me because in the realm of spirituality, it's pretty plain and simple. You know, everybody has intuition. This is something that scientists, doctors in the Western medicine sphere even agree with, which is like crazy. It's not this mystery. It's not this very esoteric thing as so much of the other stuff I talk about is. This is a very human thing, and it's funny because it's still really hard for so many of us to connect to it. Meanwhile, it's ever present in all of us. So what is intuition? So intuition, you probably have had a date with it. You've probably felt it before. It's this inner guidance, and many different people, different traditions have a different view for personifying intuition, where it comes from, if it is more of a physiology kind of thing of your body's like mechanism for survival, or if it is more of a spiritual thing. I say why not both, you know? And so how you personify intuition in your head is totally up to you and what resonates, okay? So maybe you're like not super spiritual and you're like, okay, this is just my body's way of telling me what it already knows, because our brain and our bodies are very intelligent and they are very sensitive to perceptions. So we're picking up information all the time, and our body and our mind most of the time is like one step ahead of us. So that can be your view, or maybe you're more of a spiritualist person and you're like, this is my higher self leading me into the right direction. Whatever you do, totally up to you. It's whatever feels good for you to understand this concept. So it is this sort of inner guidance, this sort of inner message leading us to what feels right for us. So in short, intuition is our soul's inner guidance. And whichever path you want to take from there, that is up to you. For me personally, because I am definitely a very spiritual person, I view it as sort of my higher self guiding me, and the smarter version of myself telling me what direction to take for the greatest good of my future. So whatever is going to be right for me. And this is something really funny that you will see once you start following your intuition more. Sometimes it will lead you places that you maybe don't want to go, or that you're like, that's risky, or that doesn't make sense. But the inner guidance is like, trust me, bitch, it's gonna be good. You know, so it's fun, it's an adventure, and you're never quite like proficient at it, if that makes sense. And by that I mean, it's really hard to get to a point where you 100% trust your intuition, no doubt. You can definitely get to a point where you're like, this is my intuition, I'm gonna do that, but like, she's seeming a little crazy right now. Like, you can doubt it, that's totally fine, but listening to it is generally gonna be really good for you. And there are a lot of blocks to our intuition, the main one being anxiety, which is like intuition's like mean cousin, right? It's like a similar feeling and sometimes pretty hard to tell the difference between. So anxiety, getting way too in your head about, like I said before, if intuition is like for me one time it was telling me to leave a specific job, a job that I wasn't fully in love with, but it paid really well, I enjoyed it, but like so many signs, so many symbols back to back were like, you need to leave this job, to where I was like, okay, something bad is gonna happen here, like I just feel it, I need to leave, which was in my head like a bad decision, because like I didn't have a new job. And meanwhile that actually did get figured out. That was another thing that happened, long story anyway. But lots of things that were telling me in the physical human mind that this isn't a safe decision, but my intuition was like, you need to leave. I ended up leaving and something kind of bad did happen there. So everything was totally fine. And like I listened to my intuition and it didn't seem logical at the point, but intuition is not always going to be logical. So that's a big block we face. I think the main thing is this getting in our head, not having a clear mind. There's a ton of things that can block us individually, and I think the biggest thing I could give to all of you collectively is to take time for meditation or for clearing your head so that you are able to decipher between anxiety and intuition, and so that you're able to get those signs and not be just on survival mode, fight or flight mode. You can see the signs, recognize them, and then like absorb them, if that makes sense. So I've compiled a list of the signs that I resonate with that most often is your intuition communicating with you. I say most often, but it's like always, so yeah. The first sign is probably the most well-known, kind of the most talked about, and this is repeated signs, symbols, numbers, words, and phrases, especially if they have had no significance before, or they just weren't popping up so much before. I know we have lucky numbers and those can come up. That's a different sort of thing in my experience. Sometimes we'll have familial numbers. So I have a number for me that kind of is indicative of like the woman in my family. Like it's like the female bloodline in my family. It's a specific number. When that comes up, that's like very specific to me, like an ancestral thing. But if you keep saying like 57 over and over and over and over and over, and it's like hidden deep, that's something to look into, okay? The most important thing to think about when you are having these repeated numbers is what were you thinking about in that moment and what were you doing? So this can be, for example, maybe your spirit guides or your brain, whatever way you are interpreting intuition, like really wants you to stop being so self-loathing and mean to yourself. And so maybe you see 57 every time, every time you're doing that, you're thinking a negative thought about yourself. This is the universe or whatever's way of getting your attention. It's like, hey, stop that. So when you snap at your cat, you're like, hey, you clap so they stop scratching on the couch, That's what the universe is doing. And I think we hear a lot about angel numbers, specifically like if you see 222, this is what that means. If you see 1111, this is what that means. And I think that there is a lot of good merit behind these collective beliefs, but I think it's really worth it to look at what those numbers mean for you. And this is something that I think will develop more as you are conscious of your intuition and of these signs coming up. But 444 could mean something different for everybody. There is a collective resonance behind it, but there also can be different things for you. Like maybe that number means something specific to you. A lot of numbers we associate with specific places or people or, birthdays, things like that. For example, 327, that's like my birthday. And I don't know what like the books say about that, but for me, that's a very personal, deep number that comes through, that has a very specific meaning for me, And so all that to say, definitely like, if you want to read online what that specific number means, go for it. But understand that it could have a very different meaning for you. And the only way you're going to find out about that is just from being aware and maybe making note of these numbers as they come up for you. And words and phrases also have to do with this. A lot of times, just a specific phrase you'll hear all the time and you're like, what the heck? I've literally never heard this phrase before. And in those cases, I really do just try to meditate on like, in what context was that coming up for me and how does that resonate currently, and kind of working from there. For those, I don't think it's like, what does the phrase mean? I think that's a very like logical brain trying to explain that. And I don't think that's necessarily what it is. The second clue is when you often feel like you know about something, or you can have an unexplained feeling about something before it happens, and it does end up happening. This is a very specific type of clair, which I will talk about the clairs in a later video, but it's something not everybody has. Not everyone has this sort of predictive intuition, but a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't. So it's like, whatever. But if you find yourself having this where you, into whatever degree it comes for you, where you're like feeling a specific way of something is going to go down this way, and it does go down that way, especially if we don't do anything, we can feel a lot of guilt. So be kind with yourself if you feel like, oh my God, I knew that was gonna happen and I talked myself out of it. Just be kind with yourself, because honestly, like, we've been raised in a culture that tells us that it's silly to listen to our intuition, that it's not logical, that it's dumb, or that it's silly. And it's not your fault. You've just kind of been conditioned to kind of brush that aside, okay? But we're very intuitive people. So just if that does come up and you feel like you missed an opportunity to change how something goes, just take it as a learning experience, and it's totally okay. Like I said, this is like a thing that a lot of people talk about, but not everybody has this, and maybe it's something you can work up to as well. But yeah, along that same line, the next thing is having a specific feeling occurring. Now, this is not so much That's So Raven, all my like 90s and 2000s babies, you know what I'm talking about. It's more of an inner knowing, and the more that you listen to your intuition, the more you will recognize the specific feeling. There are people who say very, very different things. So again, this is where I'm going to pass it off to you and tell you just to really keep track of when these things come up, how they feel, which is like hard at first because that's not what you're focusing on. You're not focusing on the feeling in your body. But what I will tell you is that in my experience, it's very different from anxiety. I've heard some people say it's like your chest is tight and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's anxiety for me. So maybe we're experiencing anxiety differently. But for me, intuition feels very different from anxiety. It might sound the same. I know it sounds a little crazy. It might sound the same in your head, but there are very different ways that anxiety comes up and that it plays itself out versus intuition. Now for this, I do want to invite you guys. I am opening my first course that I've ever done. It's called Eye to Eye. It's an intro to intuition, and I just want to invite you guys to join if you would like to. I will leave the link down below in the description, but basically this is a beginner-friendly crash course into intuition, and one of the big things that I want to touch on is the difference between anxiety and intuition, because for me personally, when I was learning it, this was the thing I had the most challenge with, as I'm somebody who is neurodivergent and has struggled a lot with anxiety, and it's kind of like a cycle. It's hard because you're like, oh my God, is this intuition? Is this anxiety? And then you get anxious because you're like, I don't know what to do about this. So I just wanted to create this very safe, welcoming space where we can fully dive into intuition and how to find it within yourself. We're going to go through so much about figuring out which of the clairs is more prominent in you, how to connect to spirit guides, deities, how to use divination, symbols and numbers, and all the good things that have to do with intuition, while touching on as well anxiety versus intuition. So we're going to go into a lot of things. Again, I will leave that in the description below if you would like to join me. Like I said, it's my first course I've ever done, so I'm very, very excited. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm just so happy to teach in that kind of online setting. And you can join anytime. It will probably be uploaded in 2 parts, but you can start anytime. There's going to be a lot of like modules to get through, so don't worry about rushing through it. Take your time. And again, I'll leave that in the description below. But like I said, I talk a lot about anxiety versus intuition in that. And what I'll say for like a brief, like collective thing is that, again, it's different. So however anxiety feels for you, it'll probably be different. So like I said, for me, anxiety is like very much up here, and it's very like like it's fast paced. It's like at the tip of something. It's like about to pour over. It's, you know, it's this anticipation. Whereas intuition is lower for me. It's a lot more closer to my solar plexus chakra, which is another thing we'll go over in Eye to Eye, Intro to Intuition. We'll talk about the chakras and how they relate to intuition. But instead of being up here, like in my throat, it's deeper. It feels more grounded. It's calm. And it generally doesn't come from a place of spiraling. So, you know, if it's like, oh my God, did I turn the freaking oven off, blah, 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 like, and then you're like cycling, and you're like, is this intuition? Like, is that why I thought of it? But then you realize that you thought of that because you saw something that reminded you of it. Then you realize that that's more prompted, whereas intuition will come completely unprompted. It won't be like, oh, someone said something and then I thought about it. That's usually anxiety. Like I said, intuition will be unprompted. It will be completely disconnected from the ego. So a big thing to note is that it doesn't want one way or the other. When it came up about me needing to leave a job, it didn't want me to leave a job because it didn't like my job. You know, it didn't want me to leave the job for XYZ. It was just like, leave your job. It didn't have any dog in the fight. You know, it didn't have a thing it wanted. Whereas anxiety will be like, oh, well, I want to leave because I don't like the hours, blah, blah, blah. And you know what I'm saying? So it's disconnected from the ego. It's also disconnected from fear. So like I said, for me, it was like, it felt like it was unsafe, but it wasn't like I'm scared to go to work. It was just like this sort of detached from emotions message. Whereas, as I kind of said before, anxiety is very attached to emotions, very attached to the ego, and a lot of fear. So I would say that's the main difference. The next one is something that I feel very connected to. I love it, and it's the ability to pick up on the vibes of a room without having been there. You might know what other people are feeling or what just happened in this room without actually knowing. And this is connected to clairsentience and claircognizance, which we'll talk about in Eye to Eye. And this, if you find yourself kind of going into areas, going into rooms, and you're like, oh shit, someone had a fight in here. This is your psychic abilities, this is your intuitive abilities picking up on it. And this is more of an example of where it's not like your intuition like wants you to know something, to do something. It's more of just your intuition telling you like, hey, be aware, here's some background information on what's happened here. And this can be indicative that maybe your specific clairs have to do with others. So like clear empathy, clairsentience, claircognizance, this is a lot about in relation to others. And maybe some of your psychic skills that are coming through are maybe like healing skills, like things that you want to help others with. If your intuition is very aware of the energy of other people, the energy of places, then that can maybe be a sign that maybe you're here to work on some healing or some coaching with others. This next one is kind of similar, but it's picking up on a bad vibe or like a weird icky vibe from specific people or items. This is connected to clairtangency, which again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about this in Eye to Eye. I'm just getting excited. But this is like picking up psychic intuitive hints about a person, an object. So the two important things when we're talking about objects, it's not so much intuition if you're like at a flea market and there's like this weird scary doll and you're like, ew, right? That's like maybe preconceived ideas and like that it's a scary doll. But if you pick up something that you otherwise would like really enjoy or have pleasant memories with or are pretty neutral upon, and you're feeling like really weird energy, really bad vibes, or like heavy energy, that is your intuition being like, no, not for you, don't do this. Or maybe there is some negativity connected to that object. This is something that a lot of us witches do, like when we're going out and foraging, we will ask the plant, and this is like very like woo-woo for those of you who are not very witchy, but we'll go out, we'll ask the plant permission before we like forage some stuff from it. And this is when you'd kind of just be like picking up a vibe, you'd be like, okay, is this all right? And there's been times when, it's rare, but there's been times when I'm like, you know what, it's not 100% yes from me. I'm gonna try like the next branch because it's just not 100%, and I respect that. Consent's important in all aspects of the world, even the natural. When we're thinking about others, an important thing to remember is that we're not projecting. So if we're picking up a bad vibe, like someone's off to us, and maybe we look into it and we realize, okay, well, when they do this specific thing or when they say this thing, it's like annoying and it's like triggering my ego. Maybe that's some shadow work we gotta do. That's not necessarily intuition. I mean, it can be intuition saying, hey, that's something you need to work on in shadow work. But it's not like this person's a bad person, or this person is not meant to be in my life because there's something they're doing that's like triggering a specific thing within my ego. I'm talking more like this person has done nothing. This person does not annoy you. There's nothing that is like off about this person, but you're just like picking up some vibes. That's intuition, and that's maybe leading you to understand that you shouldn't be with this person, you shouldn't hang out with this person, or maybe something like this person's like kind of going through it, or there's just some weird vibes attached to them. So that's when your intuition can like really look out for you in terms of interpersonal relationships. Another thing that can happen that means your intuition is very strong and trying to get your attention is when you feel suddenly very drawn towards something unexpectedly that's not so much your kind of thing. It's outside of your usual interest, but it feels really, really aligned to jump into it or to work with it. So for example, I was not super into the occult, the witchy things. I was pretty into Eastern religions, kind of like more dabbling into Buddhism and stuff, but still didn't feel like super, 100% about it. And then I got my first deck of tarot cards and I was like, oh my God, this is spooky. This is so cool. And, I did have resistance to it, like at first. I remember like a couple years before that, this is so funny. I took this test online and it was like, what's your religion? I was just like so lost, and I didn't know, I had very unique views. I didn't know where that aligned on the spectrum of religion and spirituality. And I got like so high neo-paganism, and then it was like second was a Wicca. And then it was just like witchy. And I remember I was like, I am not a Satan worshiper, because I had been raised in the Midwest. I thought so much silly stuff. I thought that witchcraft and Satanism were the same thing. I thought it was like spooky stuff. And obviously that's not true, but I was misled. I did not know what I was doing. But then when I got these tarot cards, I was like, I feel so connected to this. Like something is drawing me into this, and it feels so aligned and just so happy, and I feel really, really good. And that's kind of what jump-started my exploration into tarot, astrology, the occult sciences, energy healing, and then feeling like, oh my God, like I found what I believe in, like I found my place. So it can be something that it's like you weren't drawn to before. Now you're like absorbed into it, and it feels so good. It feels so aligned. Makes you feel refreshed and happy, all that stuff. So that's another hint that your intuition is guiding you towards something new, something else. And lastly, this one is not a fun one. This is not a fun one, but one that, alas, I have experienced. And this is random repeated illness. Now, I am not a doctor. I am not in the medical field, so definitely see a doctor. I did. But a lot of times, if we're going down a real wrong path, especially once we've made the initial connection to our intuition, to our higher self, I feel like depending on how deep you are into it, the harder your higher self will go on you. It's kind of like when you're new to it, you're dipping your toes into it, you start to veer off course, your higher self is like, okay, honey, we're gonna come back. But once you know what you're doing, once you know better, at least my higher self, she doesn't play around. She will smack me back into place, okay? And I think it's just because I know better, it really is that. So last year, if you guys follow me on Instagram, you've seen this whole saga unfold. I got really sick, and it was really the strangest illness I ever had. It was like I would randomly get a fever and just feel like every muscle in my body just ached. It was weird. It was like a cold, but so much worse. It was not COVID, because I have had that before and it was nothing like that. And I tested. It was so weird, and it would last 24 to 48 hours, and then it would go away and be good, and then it would happen the exact next week on the same day. And this happened 4 times. So for a whole month, every Tuesday, I was like, I'm gonna be sick, and I wanted it not to happen. I wasn't manifesting it. But I kept doing shit that the higher self did not want, right? I was overworking. I was forcing myself to go ham. I was doing a lot of computer work. I was not leaving the house. And my higher self did it, knocked me, like I was like so crampy everywhere. I couldn't focus. I couldn't write. I couldn't do my work. And so it like literally put me out of work, and it forced me to take a break. And then the universe was like, okay, you catching on to that? But then I'd fall back into it. You know how it goes. So it's one of those things where a lot of times if what you're meant to do, especially in my case, is to rest, and you resist that and you like double down in the overworking and whatever, then the universe will force you to rest. So this is why me and so many people will tell you, like, if you're feeling those signs of getting a little sick or just feeling super fatigued, things like that, don't let it get so far, And I ended up going to the doctor. I had blood tests done. I got tested for all this stuff. Everything came back normal. I got tested for everything. Everything came back normal. And they were like, I don't know. Sorry. I was like, shit, I know what it is. Fuck. So, yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, it's annoying, but your intuition will do it. Once it knows that you know better and you need a break. So that's my case. So thank you guys for watching. Again, I invite you to join me in my Eye to Eye Intro to Intuition course. It's going to be so much fun. I'm so excited. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up and comment and let me know what you guys thought of the video. You can follow me on Instagram as well. It's like a little bit more personal. You can see a deep dive into my life as I go on my stories and talk about random things like my cats and the rain here in Los Angeles. And yeah, have a good time. Awesome. Love that. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys next time. Bye.